What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the Big Ten betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, my co-host, Collin Wilson, almost at Arkansas time. But first, before we get to the SEC, we have to talk some Big Ten. You ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll, man. After going to the media days and hearing Kevin Warren say that they're basically going to do what they want and they're going to scoop any team to join this conference, and USC and UCLA might just be the beginning. I'm excited to see how this leaders and legends turns out. I mean, I'm just amazed at how college football is transcending, and the Big Ten is right at the lead of that, especially with these TV contracts, the details that are coming out on that. So, hey, this is an exciting league. I'm excited to see how it pans out.
No new head coaches in this league. 14 teams, zero head coaching changes. There are 8 new offense coordinator changes, depending on how you look at like Co versus Maine, and 8 defensive coordinator changes. Up to, some are kind of questionable. Like, do you think Michigan has a true quarterback battle? I kind of do, but there's some that are, but you could argue up to 7 quarterback battles, which we'll get into. Ohio State, the overwhelming favorite to win the Big Ten. They're minus 200. Michigan next at plus 800. Wisconsin 12-1, Penn State 14-1, Nebraska, Iowa 20-1, and you start to get down on Michigan State, Minnesota, Purdue, etc. The Big Ten East, which is obviously one of the most loaded divisions in all of college football. Ohio State's a minus 300 favorite to take it home. Their win total, we'll start there because Alabama, we agree. We've talked about this. I think most agree. It's not rocket science here. Ohio State and Alabama are head and shoulders above the rest of the field this year. I wouldn't be shocked, depending on how Georgia handles, their all of the bodies they lost. I wouldn't be shocked that at some point, and say Clemson's quarterback situation doesn't work out and everything goes right for Alabama and Ohio State, that maybe they get up to they're 14 points better than the third best team. It's crazy to say, but it actually wouldn't shock me this year. So Ohio State, their win total, you can find it. I mean, I hate these over. These books don't want to get middled in other various reasons, but over 10.5 minus 230. I think what? You also can find. Let's see what else is over 11 minus 130. I think is out there. I project 11.4 wins. I have them over a 2-touchdown favorite in every single game. So I don't really see value at over 11 minus 140. Look, we don't really have to spend too much time on Ohio State. They're going to be double-digit favorites in every game. We know about their offense, right? They lost some talent in the NFL at receiver and offensive line, but they're still reloaded. Heisman potential quarterback, Heisman potential running back, and then they bring in Jim Knowles, which is that's the biggest thing on the defense. It's now potentially a national title contending defense because of the organization and scheme that he will bring. So this is a complete team. It's one of the top 2 teams in the country. I think they're just a hair behind Alabama. If the defense really comes together, I think they'll give Alabama a run. And remember, they were 129th in returning experience going into last year. So I think that the only question here is, I was thinking about here's my argument of laying minus 200 on Ohio State to win the Big Ten. If they just lose one game, I think they're going to run the table. But if they lose one game in the regular season before that Michigan game, only just one, right? They go to Michigan State and Penn State. As long as they beat Michigan, and then as long as they beat, say, Wisconsin, then they still win the Big Ten in all likelihood. So they'll be like a 20-point favorite in both those games. That's like a minus 600 parlay. Now, obviously, other things that happened before, but they are so much better than every other team in this conference. Maybe Michigan is closer than I might have power rated, but any thoughts on how to approach Ohio State from a betting perspective, or you don't see anything here?
Yeah, I mean, we are not a podcast that sits around and just we're at the water cooler talking about how good they are. We have to give betting deliverables, and that's really tough with Ohio State when they've been outpriced. Even Jackson Smith-Njigba is down to 25-1 for the Heisman in certain spots, opening up at 100-1 when Heisman odds were put out there. and you just can't find a good bet on these guys. And you mentioned it. The biggest acquisition is Jim Knowles coming in from Ohio State. A year ago, we're sitting here talking about Kerry Coombs and the bullet position, and we're going to figure out a way to have a floater go all over the field, and that's going to stop us from getting burned. That should all be done now with Jim Knowles coming in. There should be nothing on this defense, that it should be an issue anymore about them getting burned. 80% returns, according to TARP. And I think one thing that you should take note is that Jack Sawyer goes into his second season. He's primed to follow the footsteps of Chase Young, from Buckeye edge rushers that we've had in the past. That's really important because I think there is a betting deliverable, and I think it has to do with their defensive ends, because if you double him with a tight end, Zach Harrison is on the other edge position, and he ranked 13th last year in pass rush grade among all FBS edge players. So, Stuck, this is going to be a play on team every week. I could sit here and tell you what they have on offense between Travion Henderson behind the line of scrimmage, what they have at wide receiver. We could talk about CJ Stroud, and even his numbers are, completely depressed inside the Heisman market. So if you're looking for a bet on these guys, right? If you don't want to go division, you don't want to go just all in the Big Ten, because right now those prices are about the same price it would be like when they're money lined in the Big Ten championship game. And I think my one worry, I thought about this because I do have a ticket on Ohio State to win the national championship. If Alabama and Georgia play each other in the SEC championship game, guess who gets to play the loser, right? Ohio State does, because Ohio State potentially be a 2 or a 3 seed, but they're not going to put Alabama and Georgia in a rematch. I know that the committee always says they're not going to make, they don't care about if it's a rematch. We'll make them play again. Come on, Ohio State's going to get paired up with the loser of that game. So potentially they have the toughest path to get through to win the national championship. But let's start with game one. Let's get a deliverable out there. This number opened up around 14 against Notre Dame. It's steamed up to 14.5, 15.5 in some spots. I make it 17.5. And I think by the time we get to week one, we're going to be looking at a number that's just teetering between 16.5 and 17.5 with sharps and squares and everybody getting on both sides of that. And I think that you should go and hit that 15.5 now. And the reason is because of what Notre Dame brings back. I know you and I have had some disagreement about what we think of Marcus Freeman, but the last time Ryan Day faced Marcus Freeman at Cincinnati, Ohio State was up 28-0 at halftime. So I don't think there's any, you could argue different teams, Cincinnati, different offenses, the level of talent and all that. But I think what's really important is that Notre Dame is expected to start a redshirt freshman and offensive tackle to start the season this year. That is really bad when you look at Jack Sawyer. It's really bad when you look at Zach Harrison. I would not want to bring a freshman tackle into a game against Ohio State's new defense with Jim Knowles, who's going to be out to prove a point after, not making the college football playoff last year, losing to Michigan. This team has goals. They're focused. Their defense is going to be great. And these defensive ends are going to eat Notre Dame's tackles for lunch. So I would bet the Notre Dame number now. I would worry about coming back on the other side later, even if probably don't even need to. But that's my bet on Ohio State right now.
Yeah, and Jim Knowles did the prep for Notre Dame in the bowl game last year, which should pay off with a whole offseason to add on to that. So I would lay it with Ohio State. Last year, Ohio State, it was the first time that they didn't make the college football playoff since 2017, the first time they didn't win the Big Ten in 5 years, and the first time they lost to Michigan in 10 years. And like I mentioned, they were one of the two least experienced teams in the country. I think that all that changes this year. Knowles has a lot to do with it. They win the Big Ten, they beat Michigan, and they go back to the college football playoff. And if it is Alabama, Georgia in the SEC championship, give me Alabama in that rematch for all the marbles. All right, so let's move on to Michigan, who win total sitting at 9.5. For what it's worth in the Big Ten East, and I should mention that we're going to talk with Mike. I interviewed Mike Allen Iannella, who does our Group of Five podcast with Mike Calabrese earlier today. He's going to give us a lot of insight on Penn State, and we touch on a few other Big Ten teams. Michigan in the Big Ten East, the problem is they have to go to Ohio State this year. So in order to win the Big Ten, in all likelihood, they're going to have to win that game, which they finally did last year. Win total sitting at over 9.5 flat. I project them at 9.3. And in the Big Ten East, I said Ohio State, no value in the win total. Penn State over 8 minus 145. I make it like 8.15. Michigan State over 7.5 minus 120. I'm at like 7.8. Maryland over 5.5 minus 135. I'm at 5.63. Indiana over 4 minus 120. I'm at 4.2. And Rutgers over 4 minus 110. I'm at 4.1. The Big Ten West has some discrepancies we'll get to, but I don't have any value on any win totals in the Big Ten East, but I know you like a couple, so you'll give us some guidance here, including Michigan. Michigan, who should be favored by more than 2 touchdowns in 7 games, big dog against Ohio State. Maybe a coin flip at Iowa, which could decide this. But look, there's new coordinators. They lost some backs and they lost some key defensive pieces in the secondary. And then most importantly, I think, are they going to still be able to generate the same amount of havoc? Because obviously they lost 2 key edge rushers to the NFL. Those are the biggest questions with Michigan. In addition to the quarterback situation, is it McCarthy? Is it McNamara? Who's going to get the job? Is it going to start with McCarthy and then eventually go to McNamara? So there are questions with this team. The special teams should fuck all year, which will help. And the offensive line might be the best in the country, and it is getting rave reviews at camp with a lot of the guys that are there. I mean, this is arguably the best offensive line in the country last year, and it could be even better this year. What are your thoughts on the Wolverines?
Yeah, a low dollar play on me for going over 9.5. I'm like you, Stuck. A lot of these numbers that are out there in the market, they've been hit for a couple months. So there's not really a lot of value left for those of us that make win totals in the offseason. And this is one of those. I mean, I make Michigan 9.3. I'm going to go over 9.5 for a number of reasons. First off, this team's going to be favored in 11 of 12 games. I think my ideology when the offseason started was, oh my gosh, Josh Gaddis is going to Miami, or Mike McDonald's going back to the Ravens. And then you look a little bit closer and you realize this is Jim Harbaugh's offense. Josh Gaddis had to bend what he wants to do, the speed and space or whatever the heck it was that he wanted to do when he got to Michigan. He had to bend and do what Harbaugh wanted on offense, which is, running this unbelievable ground attack behind Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum. So I don't expect any change in the offense whatsoever. As a matter of fact, Jim Harbaugh said it out loud at Big Ten Media Days. And when he was pressed about who your quarterback's going to be, I think within 30 seconds, he said Cade McNamara is going to be the starter. And then 30 seconds later, he said JJ is going to be the starter. So, JJ McCarthy is going to be the starter. But really, I think he's going to do more of the hot hand. McNamara with the highest floor, McCarthy with the perceived highest ceiling. Right. So I think it just depends. And he only had 41 dropbacks last season. The real worry with JJ McCarthy is protection of the ball. If that improves, he would probably see the field all the time. And the good news is the offensive line is anchored.
Got a little Manziel in him.
Yeah, no kidding. And the good news is that the offensive line is anchored by one of the best centers in the nation, and Olusegun Oluwatimi. And Blake Corum is back at running back. The offense, I don't think, is going to have anything to stop them from what we saw last year. As a matter of fact, it could be better. Ronnie Bell back.
Yeah, Ronnie Bell back. The wide receivers are more experienced overall in general. They've flashed a lot more in camp. I think the passing game should be a lot more explosive this year. I mean, Bell is just such a huge piece for them. And he had his knee brace off today. Like, he looks fully healthy.
Yeah. And then you have Donovan Edwards, who kind of came on late at the end of last season, can do everything from rushing to receiving to even passing the ball. He was targeted 11 times in the game against Maryland, and it was just an absolute highlight reel. So if you get that for a full season, I don't know what the limitations are on this Michigan offense, until they run into an elite defense like they did with Georgia in the playoff last year. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball and you think, oh my gosh, Mike McDonald completely revamped this Michigan defense to where they're not, getting torched, or they get in these big games and they get pushed around. I talked to Jim Harbaugh in depth about this. I was said, Jesse Minter is also with the Ravens. Can you tell us, tell me the process of how you went to the Ravens and you were, looking at Mike McDonald. He said, listen, we had Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter both on the interview list for the job of defensive coordinator here at Michigan. We just got farther down the road in the interview process with Mike McDonald. So that's who we took. So when Mike McDonald went back to take over the defensive coordinator duties for the Ravens, who was the first one to call? Jesse Minter. So now Jesse, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mike McDonald ever leaves the Ravens, if Jesse Minter is the guy to step up and take over that job. But the Harbaugh family here is sharing coordinators and assistants like there's no tomorrow. So there's not going to be a drop off in the aggressive blitz or dropping 8 and passing downs. There's just not going to be a change. And I expect these two guys that have been in the Ravens, coaching system so long, it's going to be the same for Michigan. I think it's just, we're going to see more of last year. I think the offense can be even more explosive. I think they can be even more efficient. And that's saying something, considering this offense is number 1 in the nation in havoc allowed. Jim Harbaugh does not like tackles for loss. There are not fumbles. He does not tolerate fumbles. So for me, he said at media days, we have 3 goals: beat Michigan State, win the Big Ten, win the national title. He said, we did not beat Michigan State. He couldn't stop repeating about how much, we didn't beat Michigan State. It's
because he knows he can't beat Ohio State this year.
Yeah. We don't mention the team from up north, I think is what I heard. But, Michigan State is a game that he'll put all his energy into. So be aware of that on your schedule as you go down. But I'm taking over 9.5. We're not changing things on both sides of the ball. I don't think the new coordinators are going to change, anything about the play calling. And this team's dangerous and they're explosive. And we have not seen a Michigan offense that is explosive downfield as well as this one.
Yeah. One thing I keep my eye on is the secondary. You lose Dax Hill and, they have some talented players that they're going to plug in there, but that's something that I'm certainly watching. I think it's a good time to bring in, let's cut into my interview with Mike Ianniello to talk some Penn State, who's the 3rd favorite in the Big Ten East. All right, now it's time to bring on our guest for the Big Ten Betting Preview podcast. And if you listen to all of our podcasts, as you should be familiar with him, Mr. Mike Ianniello. And if you're not familiar with him, that's the reason I had him on, because Mike, as I refer to him, do such a good job with our Group of 5 podcast during the year. If you're like a legacy and you've been with me forever and you're like, I only listen to Stuckey, well, stop. So you got to listen to the Group of 5 too, because they do such a great job each and every week. So I wanted to introduce you those of you that aren't familiar, and then also for those that are, get his thoughts on the Big Ten and specifically Penn State. The problem with your Penn State Nittany Lions is the division they're in. It is not easy, and Ohio State is a big favorite to come out of that division. Now they do have to go to Penn State. I assume that's the whiteout game. But the Penn State win total, not sure your thoughts on that. When I did the analysis, I said that the win total and the entire season, the trajectory of the season, I didn't even realize I'm wearing a Purdue shirt. Probably comes down to that Purdue game in week 1. And by the way, I am a very anti-conference game week 1 guy. I hate them. I don't think that you should start with the conference game. But they're 3-point favorites. I believe the market's still sitting at 3. Obviously, a massive game for the win total, for where Penn State's going to go. So what are your overall thoughts on Penn State as a team? What are you worried about? What do you feel good about? Do you like the over or the under? Is it as simple as I'm making it? And it comes down to that, probably going to come down to that Purdue game.
See, I'm a little not as bullish on Purdue, to be honest with you. So that's kind of one of those games that when I'm trying to forecast the win total, I actually have as a Penn State win. I do like this team this year, over 8.5. I do think they go 9-3. For me, it's never a good sign when you constantly have to defend your quarterback. But Sean Clifford was light years better last year than he was the previous years in his career. 4th year as a starter, one of the most veteran quarterbacks in the country. His 2nd year under Mike Yurcich, which is his first time ever having the same coordinator 2 years in a row. He had more big-time throws last year than the previous 3 seasons combined. And it's easy for, you hear all the talk is like, oh, they lose John Dotson. John Dotson was awesome. But maybe this, I don't know, it's just, I get it's different regimes, but like from a Penn State perspective, like we heard the same thing when we lost Allen Robinson, and then Chris Godwin's a star, and then he moves on. And it's like, how you gonna replace Godwin and Deshaun Hamilton? And then KJ Hamler bursts onto the scene. And then when Hamler left, it was like, oh, all that speed. Then John Dotson emerges. Now it's just going to be Parker Washington. Like, I'm not worried about losing Dotson because I think Parker Washington is the next superstar, former 4-star at 820 yards last year. To me, he has, he almost has better hands. His hands are unbelievable. Like, he could be a 1st-round pick next year as well. Mitchell Tinsley comes in from Western Kentucky, who, we love down there in the G5 land. They have 2 stud tight ends. The biggest issue with the offense has always been the running game. So, they signed Nick Singleton, who's the number 1 running back in the entire country. I think he gets plenty of carries early. I think they are going to use him a lot to begin the year, which is good.
Because Clifford gets Clifford's gotten a lot of shit, but man, he got no help from the running game. Absolutely none.
And he's mobile too, which is good. And you look at last year, people forget they were 5-0, 4th in the country, and up. What were they up? 17. when he got hurt against Iowa. And
I had Iowa that game. Probably my luckiest cover of the year.
yeah, those scumbag Iowa fans were like I'm sure Pete Rudden was over there booing Clifford as he was dead on the field. Still clearly hurt against Illinois. I will die on the hill. They go 9-3 last year if Clifford stays healthy. So, obviously it was disappointing. Clifford's just going to continue to get better. We saw it last year. The Penn State defense is always good. So I'm not really worried about that. They lose Brent Pry. You can argue Manny Diaz was maybe one of the best coordinator hires of the offseason. I think Manny Diaz is going to be awesome on this defense. Sure, they lose some key they lose linebackers. They lose Jaquan Brisker, who was the heart and soul of that defense. But Jair Brown's back. He led the country's interception last year. Joey Porter Jr. is a stud at corner. It's weird.
In the NFL.
My whole Penn State, career was like, it was the D-line and the linebackers, and the secondary was atrocious when I was there. Now it's kind of flipped. They do still have Curtis Jacobs, who's kind of the next, linebacker stud. PJ Mustipher coming back at the defensive line is absolutely massive.
The defense was just night and day with him in the lineup before he got hurt.
I'm stunned he came back. That was like, that was a big one, him coming back. To me, there's two big questions. Obviously, Brew Wonderback's one of them. Is the offensive line is kind of always a concern at Penn State, especially recently. And losing Jordan Stout is massive. He was the number one punter draft. He got
Baltimore Ravens, baby.
Yeah, you're gonna love him down there. Him and Tucker. I mean, that's the best special teams unit in the NFL. So as far as a win total perspective, I'm giving Penn State, Purdue, Ohio, Central Michigan, Northwestern, Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers. That's 7. Win total is 8.5. So you look at Michigan and at Auburn. Auburn probably is going to stink. So to me, you have to win one of those games at Michigan, at Auburn. I'm chalking Ohio State up as a loss, even though it is at home, just realistically. And then you got Minnesota and Michigan State at home. So to me, it's going to come down to Michigan State, which is the last game of the year. It's at home. We always just play weird, bad games against Michigan State. So that game does scare me. I don't agree with you necessarily on the come down to Purdue. It's dumb to say it comes down to last game of the year, but I think it comes down to last game, Michigan State. So when I look at the schedule, I give them 7 wins. I think you got to win one of the at Michigan, at Auburn, and then you got to win one of Minnesota, Michigan State at home. So I'm going to give them at Auburn, and I'm going to give them Minnesota probably at home. To me, that gives you 9-3. You lose to Ohio State, Michigan State again. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. But to be fair, I wouldn't be shocked if they beat Michigan State at home and go 10-2. So I like over 8.5 personally. And I agree with you. It's the division's always the issue. By the way, I don't think there's a fan base on the country that is hoping the divisions and conferences goes away.
Yeah.
Because we would have made the playoffs in 2016 and we got screwed with that. We beat Ohio State and then they get in the playoffs over us. So that would be huge for Penn State if we get rid of those divisions.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I see 9-3 if they beat Purdue. So my thought, you have them beating Purdue. So my thought is like, I don't want to, it's a pass for me. But if why tie up your money all year? Because if they don't lose to Purdue, it might be a sign of other problems. So just bet them against Purdue in week 1 and you don't have to hold your money. But anyway, good stuff there. All right. Thanks again to Mike. Make sure you check out the Group of 5 podcast each and every week. We love those guys. So Collin, we covered Penn State pretty in depth.
Mm-hmm.
Mike also likes the Michigan State over. He doesn't see as big of a drop as the market is implying from what they won 11 games last year. They on second order win totals, they probably pop up a lot because they went 7-2 in the Big Ten. They were negative yard differential. They were 4-0 in one possession games. But you also like the over. I'm at like 7.9 right around there. So 7.84 on the dot. So if I had to, I would go over. There's some winnable games on here, but they have 4 gimmies. They're underdog 4 times, and then they're a favorite as four times as a single digit favorite. There's just some tough spots that would give me a little hesitation. Like if you just break down the nuances of the schedule. So, they go to Maryland and they'll be a small favorite there, but that's before Ohio State. And, then they get Wisconsin at home, which is like a coin flip game between Ohio State and Michigan. And then after this huge run of this is just a brutal stretch, by the way. At Washington, out of conference, coin flippish game. Then you're home against Minnesota. Then you're at Maryland. Then you're home against Ohio State. Then you're home against Wisconsin. Then you're at Michigan. After that brutal stretch, then you go to Illinois. So like kind of let down-ish. And that is a 7-game stretch, which is absolutely brutal. So they should win their first two. They should win their last two. How do they handle kind of, can they upset someone in there? Do they get trapped a couple times? So I'm kind of worried about their schedule, just how it sets up. So it's a stay away for me. What are your thoughts on Sparty?
I'm a believer in Mel Tucker. This guy just runs around.
You're gonna buy his NFT? He's got like an NFT coming out now. Do you see this? He's got like a token.
Oh, gosh, I got to stop buying Shohei Ohtani NFTs and get me a Mel Tucker NFT. No, I mean, I love Mel Tucker. The guy just runs around with a chip on his shoulder. That's the way he lives his life. That's the way he coaches his team. 7-2 against the spread as an underdog so far. And he covered every non-conference game last season. He does not take a week off. And his attitude is legitimately always little brother mode, right? He adopts that. He puts that on his players, and that's the way that they play. I mean, Michigan State's done some things. They've beat expectations so far since Mel Tucker has been there. And, we kind of throw out the 2-5 record from the pandemic season because there was an upset in there that he shouldn't have had. But, you have to look at the player personnel. Kenneth Walker's gone. Jalen Naylor's gone, two of the most explosive players in the Big Ten. Along with the offensive line, they all depart and they leave huge holes. But the Spartans got over 6,800 snaps from the transfer portal, plus 8 players gained. Former Wisconsin running back Jalen Berger was dismissed from Wisconsin, but now he's on the squad here. We don't know what happened there. He wasn't going to get any playing time with Braylon Allen, who we'll talk about. And then Colorado's Jarek Broussard. You would think somebody that Mel Tucker recruited before he took off for East Lansing is going to come in. They're going to fill the role of Kenneth Walker. And then in the air game, it's all about Jaden Reed. I know Jalen Naylor's gone, but here we have, somebody that can do special teams, somebody that's going to be one of the most electric wide receivers in the nation, hauling in passes from Peyton Thorne. So I don't see a monster drop off, even though Kenneth Walker, the Heisman hopeful, is not there. I don't see it dropping off that much. And the defense returned 77%. And if you look at that,
some good transfers, and the hope is that the pass defense gets a lot better because it was absolutely a very experienced secondary. Now you had a Georgia corner. And I like some of the linebackers they brought in, Power 5. So the hope is that a linebacker from UNLV, excuse me, that the hope is that the pass defense gets better because it was just absolutely dreadful, and Ohio State exposed them in that regard. But there should be some improvement, you would think.
Yeah, and that's because of the scheme that Scotty Hazelton is calling. They get 75% of their PBUs back. But this team got very comfortable rushing 3 and dropping 8 and letting everybody have the middle of the field. But then when you're finishing drives, when your defense doesn't hold up past the 40, it's, you're going to get into boat races, which is you and I were betting overs week in, week out. And I think by the third quarter, you and I were cashing tickets. So, and you can also tell that they were doing this rush 3, drop 8 by the fact that there was this monster dip in havoc, right? So when you sacrifice getting pressure and you sacrifice all of that just to protect giving up explosive plays, which they've been excellent at preventing explosive plays and disguising their zone coverage, you're going to give up a lot of the field. But if you can't stand up in the end zone, then you're going to get beat. So that is something that they have to work on. There's a chance this team could win 10 games. They're going to be favorites in 8. You mentioned Washington. That's a small one. So when I say favorites in 8, there's 2 of them in there that are really short. But when you look at these spots as a favorite, I'm not really seeing a loss here. Western Michigan, Akron, Washington. Say what you want about Washington, but they've a little bit of a rebuilding process, maybe a little bit too early for Kalen DeBoer to win that game against Sparty. And then Minnesota, Maryland, Illinois, and Rutgers. I'm not hearing an offensive line or a secondary out of any of those teams that's going to be able to stop what Michigan State wants to do. If you think about Maryland, they could challenge them and get into a scoring fest through the air, but there's a lot of these teams that Michigan State just has a schematical advantage against. So I'm taking over 7.5, even though I projected at 7.7. They're going to be favored in a lot of games. And considering Mel Tucker's, history as an underdog, history against non-conference play, I think that translates. I think they're going to snap somebody up. I don't know if it's Michigan. I don't know if it's Ohio State, but these conference odds that came out of like 60-1, true odds for Michigan State should be about 22-1 to win this conference. I'm not saying go out and spend a whole bunch on 40-1, 60-1, whatever these numbers are, but that is just way too high on these guys.
Yeah, Maryland, we agree that numbers about right. We'll see if with another defensive coordinator, if they can improve on that side of the ball and if they can stop turning the ball over. Hope is that a new transfer kicker, Ryland is pretty reliable, will help their special teams, but it's a MAC kicker, so we'll see. But it's going to be the same old Maryland story. They're going to be able to score. They have an electric receiving room. I think the number's about right. The two teams bringing up the rear in the Big Ten East, Indiana and Rutgers, win totals, both of their win totals sitting at 4. Both teams have a ongoing. I don't think there's any update. Let me double check to see. Yeah, I don't think there's been any update on who's won any of the quarterback jobs at Indiana or Rutgers. I'll give you, Indiana, the quarterback play at both of these schools last year was absolutely dreadful. I think both numbers are spot on here. I'll give you just a couple sentences on each team, and if you like the over or under on each.
Yeah, I'm laying off of a Maryland future. I do love to watch this team, especially how explosive they are on offense with Dante Demas coming back fully healthy. Raheem Jarrett is another weapon on the outside. Talia Tagovailoa finished 6th best in uncatchable pass rate. I mean, he's accurate, and that's fantastic. But I'm staying away.
Except when he's throwing pick sixes to burn me against Penn State.
They come in dozens. But, I think the one game that you need to look out for on Maryland's schedule, they're going to play SMU. If you want to go over the win total with Maryland, they have to beat SMU. And if you look at SMU, that game against Maryland falls the week before the Mustangs face their old coach, Sonny Dykes. I'm not sure they're going to have a care in the world about playing Maryland when they got Sonny Dykes. There's a little bit of off-field stuff, that happened when Sonny Dykes left the campus. And I think that roster for SMU is going to be ready to go and not really looking at Maryland. So I would go there. Indiana, as much as I enjoyed meeting head coach Tom Allen, I think, just one of the nicest guys I met out of all the coaching circles. This team's going the wrong direction, completely the wrong direction. You were bringing in Connor Bazelak from Missouri. He had more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws last year. You have gotten Walt Bell as your offensive coordinator from UMass. There were struggles between Bell's coaching style and the players. It never sat well. I think there was going to be a strike. There was all kinds of things going on up at UMass. His previous stop at Florida State, there were rumors of Willie Taggart taking his play calling away. So if we're trying to find answers in the post-Michael Penix, Kalen DeBoer era, I don't think Walt Bell is it, and Connor Bazelak is definitely not it. So, the
Indiana, I think, needs, if you're going to bet their win total, just wait. Like if you like them, if you like some of the transfers they brought in, it's ugly. I mean, last year their quarterbacks, they started 4 quarterbacks, including a walk-on. They had 9 touchdowns and 15 interceptions with a 51% completion percentage. And I don't see it getting much better this year. But their last game of the year at home against Purdue, probably going to need to win that to go over. So save your money. That's probably going to decide their win total. They have 3 winnable games to start the year against Illinois, Idaho, and Western Kentucky. And I'll throw out a quick nugget here. Teams that play their first game, which is going to happen with Indiana, for whatever it's worth, historically, they have hit it about 59%. In conference, it's like 78%. Illinois is going to play against Wyoming in week 0, and then they're going to play Indiana. Part of your brain thinks, all right, they got the rust out, right? And they're going to play a game before Indiana. But for whatever reason, historically, I think it's just that, like, hey, now we have tape on them. They don't have tape on us from everything we're working on in the summer. And there's going to be, I think, 10 or 11 examples of this in week 1. Maybe that benefits Indiana. They'll be a small favorite in that game. Idaho and Western Kentucky. But Western Kentucky's off a bye. They also have to play Nebraska off a bye. Rutgers off of a bye. They have 2 road trips, 2 separate back-to-back road trips, Cincinnati, Nebraska, and Ohio State, Michigan State. So after those first 3, like if they don't beat Illinois, not a given. And if they don't beat Western Kentucky off a bye, not a given. It's not going over. It's going to get ugly. So they better start 3-0 because then it gets brutal. This is a top 10 schedule. How about Rutgers? What do you see there?
Yeah, Rutgers is an underplay too. I mean, I'm happy that they made a bowl last year and Shiano's continuing to, get the recruiting profile going up, but I'm not a believer in Taj Harris coming in via portal from Syracuse. I mean, he breaks a lot of tackles, but he's supposed to fill Bo Melton's role, but he's just not the same wide receiver. And then if you look at, some of the other pieces they have, all of this is on quarterback Gavin Wimsatt. One of the high 4-star recruit is going to be one of the highest recruits that Rutgers has ever had. And if he comes in, then there's going to be a lot of gap runs, zone runs. Offensive coordinator Sean Gleason will find ways to use them, and then it could go over the win total. But I'm not banking on it whatsoever. So other than fumble luck, I don't know how they get to 5 wins. I mean, they're going to be
the punter. They have a really good punter.
They do. No, they do. And by the way, I have a video. I asked him, I said, now that the punt god is in the NFL, what would you like your nickname to be? And he deferred. He said, I'll let you guys at Action Network pick it out. So Stuck, you're on the clock for getting Rutgers punter new nickname out. But under for these guys. They're going to punt a lot.
Will do. Yeah. I mean, I have them projected at around 4, but I have them a double-digit underdog at 7. So like a realistic ceiling is like 5 and a realistic floor is 2. So if I were to go one way or the other on the over under, I would go under. Linebacker, which was, last year, a lot of experience. They had 3 linebackers that combined for 84 starts and 850 tackles that are gone, had more injuries to linebacker in the spring. This is now a very questionable linebacker group. So we'll see what happens to Rutgers, but also like Indiana, quarterback situation is meh, and they have a top 10 schedule, top 10 strength of schedule. All right, no good. That's not a recipe for success. All right, let's move on to the Big Ten West. Wisconsin plus 170 to take it home. Nebraska is sitting at around plus 350. Iowa plus 400. Minnesota plus 500. Purdue plus 600. Then Illinois 30-1. Northwestern 100-1. So you can see a little more wide open than the Big Ten East without Ohio State there at the top. Wisconsin, obviously the questions, and look, one of the things you notice when you look at the Big Ten is listen to some of these names: Graham Mertz, Sean Clifford, Spencer Petras. Let's throw Tanner Morgan, Connor Bazelak, Ryan Helinski. Well, I guess Connor Bazelak's young. Ryan Helinski, DeVito, Noah Vedral, all these quarterbacks that have been around that have not had a success are still around somehow and still have the jobs. And that's the same case with your boy, Graham Mertz, who is going to get the job again because Wolf is not getting it. The backup, it's going to get Mertz. Mertz is going to have another chance. And what can he do? He will have one of the best running backs in the country. I think potentially the best talent-wise. But there are other questions on this roster. The offensive line is not solidified yet, and that usually is. Obviously, at receiver, there's a new offensive coordinator, Bobby Ingram, who wants to pass it more. You want to do that with Graham Mertz. I'd spread it out more. We'll see how that works out. And then the defense, which Jim Leonard is going to get a big-time job eventually, always does a great – and by the way, I think Wisconsin's offensive line is going to be excellent, but there's still some questions on a couple spots. But the defense, which Leonard always has, just right in line as one of the best in the country, lost a lot of talent, especially at inside linebacker. Their linebacker, they're going to have like their 4th linebacker coach too in the last year. So there's a lot of questions on this defense, which usually can rely on with Wisconsin. Can you really trust Graham Mertz? I have them projected at 8.24 win total, not over 9 plus 110. So I'd lean under here. They have a loss at Ohio State you can chalk up. They have 4 gimme wins. I have them favored right around minus 9-10 in 4 other games. And then small dogs in a couple. But I think it's under or nothing with Wisconsin because the defense just lost too much, and you just can't trust Graham Mertz.
Yeah.
Agree?
Yeah, I'm done putting money on Graham Mertz. More turnover-worthy plays and interceptions than big-time throws and TDs. His numbers slightly improved with pressure in the pocket, but it's not that great. And you're going to pass the ball with Braylon Allen in the backfield. So yeah, it's all running. And the good news is they have at least 5 offensive linemen with 300 career snaps. But passing downs, you get Wisconsin behind schedule, they're going to be in deep trouble. They were dead last in passing downs explosiveness last year. So it's a pretty simple offense to figure out, put 11 in the box, just stop Braylon Allen, you'll be fine. Defense lost 8 out of top 10 tacklers, like you mentioned. They're missing more than 50% of their PBUs and pressures. They do get 2 corners through the portal who are, going to be okay. But the crossover schedule is killer. Ohio State, at Michigan State. Maryland is not a pushover. This is a crossover schedule from hell. So
Well, they're the two. If you look at the odds for the Big Ten West, the three favorites are Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin. Wisconsin goes on the road to
Yep.
both.
Yep. So they're not my play to win the West at all. I mean, at Iowa, at Nebraska, I mean, the under is the play here. You'd want a hedge position in Lincoln on November 19th, but I'm not playing Wisconsin whatsoever.
Moving on to Iowa, win total. The win total for Iowa over 7.5, minus 105, minus 110. Guess what? Iowa City in the entire state of Iowa, outside of Ames. I make your win total 8.01. I don't show value on the under. They have coaching stability, and guess what? I gave a bump to Iowa because I'm tired of just them overperforming. And I went back and I just double checked all the things we talked about last year. Every year, they're going to have great special teams. They're going to win the turnover battle. They're not going to get penalties. All these little things. They're going to overperform. So, I'm not betting they're over. I have them at 8. We'll see if the offensive line can improve, especially when you lose your all-world center. And then it comes down to quarterback play. Spencer Petras, how consistent can he be? What does this offense look like? There's a lot of questions on the roster. They also draw Ohio State and Michigan out of the East. They do get Wisconsin, Nebraska at home. So could potentially be good for the division. By the way, at Illinois, brutal spot. Illinois has some good spots. They play Michigan, and then they go to Illinois before going to Ohio State. A little trappy. So we'll see if the defensive line can generate havoc. So there's some questions with this team, but I have them favored by double digits in 6 games. Clear loss at Ohio State, and then 5 coin flips. The last 4 games of the year are all coin flips, basically. -3, -3, -3. Yeah, pick. So nothing for me. But they're going to outperform metrics. That's what they're going to do. So I'm not going under. But their season will be, they got a big game against Michigan at home too, but those last 4 games are going to make or break their season.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa's Iowa. So, I mean, there's not a lot of questions for Kirk Ferentz at Big Ten Media Days because they do what they do and they don't change much. I'm not sure if Ferentz knows that this transfer portal exists. They brought in just one player, so 82% of the offense returns, but only 31% of the rushing yards. They lose one of their best running backs over to Purdue that we'll talk about. But, there's really 2 sides to Spencer Petras. There's the one that numbers say that he had his best season ever from a decision-making standpoint by increasing his big-time turnover to turnover-worthy play ratio. But then there's a Spencer Petras that was benched and threw just a single TD and 7 INTs in the second half of the season. So we'll see which one shows up this year. Tight end Sam Laporta is still there. He's going to be the biggest weapon on offense on every down. He was 9th in yards per route run of all Power 5 tight ends. That means he's extremely explosive when he does get it. And the Hawkeyes defense was stellar per usual. And Jack Campbell is just a big, oversized linebacker that just destroys everything that he runs into. And Riley Moss, the pick 6 king, is back. Iowa is going to be double-digit favorites in 6 games. So, there's a projected spread, like Stuck said, of 5 or less the entire month of November against Purdue, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska. So this isn't over for me. I expect Iowa to keep doing Iowa things and end up in a bowl with 8 wins on New Year's Day.
All right, let's move on to Nebraska, who I think we both like to win this division, so I'm sure that will end well. They are plus 350 to win the division, over 7.5, minus 120. I played over 7.5, minus 110. It is my favorite and only win total that I played so far in the Big Ten. It is the one I show the biggest edge on by far, and it's one of my biggest bets that I've made. I show Nebraska, there's a lot of things that I like what they did in the offseason. I think Casey Thompson will be fine. They did lose, a lot of key pieces that you have to be a little concerned about. An NFL cornerback, their interior offensive line. They lost a lot of talent, just various positions, but they brought a ton in through the transfer portal. I love what they did there. I love some of the coaches they brought in, specifically offensive coordinator Mark Whipple. I think the offense will be fine. And remember, this is a team last year that inexplicably went 0-9. 0-9 in one possession games. They somehow went 1-8 in the Big Ten with a positive point differential. I don't even know how that's possible. So, but I like some of the, a lot of positive regression potentially coming. but I like some of the players that they brought in. I think Casey Thompson will be fine, and I love the schedule. In their first 9 games, I have them favored in all 9, 8 by double digits. The only one I don't is home against Oklahoma, and I love that matchup. Win just those games, then you're at 8 wins, and you clear the win total, and that's before a coin flip at Ohio to close the year. There'll be a dog maybe around a touchdown to Michigan, and then they'll be favored at home against Wisconsin before we even get to those last 3 games. Even if you lose to Oklahoma, just win the 8 games, you're favored by double digits. Now, we know Nebraska doesn't like to do that, but a lot of positive regression coming. I love who they brought in. I love the coaches that they brought in. And then one of the biggest things, why did Nebraska lose so many close games? Well, a lot of it was mental errors that you hope that they can fix and special teams blunders. I can't even count on how many times Nebraska's lost games over the past few years because of special teams. Well, what do they have now? A special teams coordinator for the first time since 2016. What did they bring in? All the FCS kicker punter of the year, brought in reliable kickers from the transfer portal, FCS level as well. The return game should be much better. The special teams, which this is a team that lost. You look at the Michigan State game. Remember the punt? They lost count. Their return games, punt and kick, were amongst the worst in the nation. I think this potentially could be your most improved special teams unit in the nation, which could turn some of those close losses into wins. Love the schedule. Love the team. Love the potential regression coming. And most importantly, I love the number. And they avoid Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan State. Give me Nebraska over. And I also love them to win the division. I'm with you there. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, my bet is on the division plus 380. And, I think when Scott Frost showed up to Big Ten Media Days, he looked very unhappy to be there. He didn't really enjoy answering questions about how he has essentially no grip on this offense whatsoever. His comment was the same no matter what was asked. Whips is in charge. Whips is running with it. Whips is the one doing that. So he's referring to Mark Whipple coming over from Pitt. And I think Scott Frost, he mentioned this is going to free me up to go handle the defense, look at the defense, inspect the defense, do some special teams. And I'm thinking, well, this is a good thing, Coach Frost. I mean, this is your job as a head coach. It's not just to do offense all the time, which, I don't think he's exactly happy that athletic director Trev Alberts is putting all this on him. But if it turns out to be wins, everybody's going to be happy. So we'll just see how things turn out. But Frost is not in control of this team whatsoever. Trev Alberts is the one pulling the strings here. So we'll see how Mark Whipple turns out running that offense. We'll see if Frost kind of overrules him on game day execution, what to do on 4th downs, what to do in certain situations. We'll see how that plays out. So that's something I would definitely monitor. But hey, the special teams unit was 127th in SP Plus rankings. That's bad. So it's really good that special teams finally going to get some love here. The biggest transfer you mentioned, Casey Thompson is coming in at quarterback, out with Adrian Martinez. And you're going to get a kid that was at Texas, and we still do not know what his ceiling can be, because there are games against Texas Tech, Oklahoma, and Kansas where he had a 16-2 TD to INT ratio. But then there's games where, against TCU where he had 4 turnover-worthy plays and looked terrible. So, the source of all this is pressure. When Casey Thompson doesn't have pressure, he had 22 TDs and 4 interceptions. When he does have pressure, his turnover-worthy plays triple his big-time throws. So, and he forces it too. And I think that's something that he's going to have to get comfortable behind this offensive line. New offensive line coach comes in, Donovan Raiola. He was described as the perfect fit for that line that returns 83% of their snaps. He was with the Bears for 3 years. So if you go do some digging on the Bears, dead last in adjusted sack rate last year. So we'll see how much Raiola was a part of that, or if it was just maybe the unit itself. So defensively, 87% of their pressures come back. 70% of their tackles come back. The PBUs take a hit, but Northern Iowa is supplying corner Omar Brown. They're supplying a linebacker in Chris Kolarovic. So we'll see. Those are big shoes to fill for JoJo Damon, who we loved backing last year. And I agree with you. I like this Nebraska team. The schedule is just so easy leading up to Thanksgiving week. You can take a ticket like I did on the division at plus 380, and you don't have to worry about it until Wisconsin and Iowa and Michigan come up there in mid-November. So this is something where you kind of I remember those little Ronco steamers. You set it, you forget it. I would bet on it. I wouldn't worry about it till November. You don't need a hedge plan at the beginning of the season. Just see how things play out, because either this is going to go extremely poorly with the way Frost has been kind of removed from the game execution portion and the game planning portion on the offense, or it's going to go real smooth and they're going to win this division. They're going to be playing in the Big Ten championship game. So I'm betting on the latter.
Yep. I completely agree. Before November 12th, there are only 2 road games. Before November 12th, they're at Purdue and at Rutgers. Minnesota, I do like the upside of bringing in Taroka as the offensive coordinator again, who just, with his RPO quick slant scheme, he had so much success with Tanner Morgan before leaving. Now he's back, and I think that could potentially do wonders for the offense. But there are questions on the offensive line, at receiver. Across, I have them as a touchdown dog in 4 games. Their win total is sitting at over 7.5 minus 130. Not much room for not much room for error there. I project them at 6. Let me see. I project them at 6.92. So I would lean the under, if anything, but I do respect that. I love that offensive coordinator move. So I'm personally staying away. You want to add a sentence or two or why you're going under on Minnesota?
Oh, I'm going under because of the offensive line. The offensive line is going to be very inexperienced. The front 7 on defense is inexperienced. The trenches on both sides of the ball can be taken advantage of. I'm glad that there are holdover players from the Kirk Soraka era when he was there, with Chris Autman-Bell, Tanner Morgan, and Mohamed Ibrahim. But there's that Mike Sanford Jr. 2-year coaching stint as offensive coordinator, that's over with. And, Minnesota just does not have it in the trench to hang with some of the teams on this schedule. There's new faces on the offensive line that does start off with New Mexico State and Western Illinois before Colorado. And that all happens for East Lansing. But the trench is going to be a thorn in the side of PJ Fleck through a lot of these games. I project 6.8, so under is the play.
Northwestern, we won't touch too much on there. Over 4 minus 105. They should be favored in 4 games, but only 2 gimmies. They got Miami of Ohio at home, far from a gimme. And then they'll probably be favored at home against Illinois to close out the year. Just wait for that game. But it's Northwestern, for whatever reason, Pat Fitzgerald, the new defensive coordinator, struggled immensely last year with Jim O'Neill. We'll see if he can get it together in year 2. But because Pat Fitzgerald, bad year, then good year, usually have a bounce back, and Northwestern a lot of times does outperform their metrics. The last team we'll touch on is Purdue. Look, Aiden O'Connell's back at quarterback. Purdue's win total over 7.5 plus 125. I project 6.52. This is an under that I may end up adding wearing Purdue gear. But then part of me just says it's probably going to come down to like the Penn State game to start the year, or maybe the Indiana game to close out the year. So do I want to tie up my money? But I do have a lot of questions with this roster. The good thing is they avoid Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State, and they have an easy road schedule, right? Like Hughes, Minnie, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana. A lot of their tougher conference games are at home, but I generally don't like that for an over with a middling team. What can O'Connell do to make everyone around him better is the biggest question, right? There's no David Bell. There's no Wright. There's not a lot of talent on the outside, and the running game is non-existent. So there's no explosiveness. They were 130th in passing explosive last year, and now they're a lot less talented on the outside of receiver, and they have no running game. So, how much can O'Connell really do when he's not playing the Tennessee defense in a bowl game? So we'll see. Karlaftis is a huge loss on the defense side of the ball. His stats won't wow you, but he's at the attention that he drew on that defensive line with double and triple teams, freed up a lot of other things that they were able to do. So I have a lot of questions about Purdue, but the first game, I hate these conference games to start at home against Penn State. They're like a field goal underdog. That sets the tone for the whole year. They win that, all of a sudden, they're going to have a chance to go over. They lose that, it's going to be tough. So I'm not sure I want to tie up my money. Any quick thoughts on Purdue before we wrap this up?
Well, let me backtrack here and do Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald told everybody at Big Ten Media Days that the formula for backing Northwestern is when he has experience. He said that flat out last year. He said literally, I thought I was listening to my own podcast last year when I heard him get up there and say, we were the lowest team in returning production last season. That's why we started off and played so poorly. The season before that, we were the highest team in returning production, and look at the kind of results we had. And I'm just sitting there like, Pat Fitzgerald is speaking my language. So if you're a believer in that, they get 80% of their offensive line snaps back. The schedule says that they can easily get to 4. Don't know where the 5th win is, but play Northwestern when Pat Fitzgerald says we have experience. As far as Purdue goes, you're right. Aiden O'Connell elevated himself so well in that offense that Jack Plummer transferred to Cal. No room for Jack Plummer anymore. O'Connell finished up 10th highest graded quarterback in the Power 5 last year, but I have issues with this team too. And this is the hot name, right? This is the name that everybody is saying can win this division and move on and play in the Big Ten championship game. But there's just, the defense loses 2 key pieces. One is George Karlaftis at edge, and then coordinator Brad Lambert. He moved on to Wake Forest, and Lambert moved this team inside the top 25 in tackling, and he limited explosive plays and passing downs. And now Ron English, Mark Hagan are going to take over, and they're going to look to, they're not going to change much with the zone coverage and the blitz rates. But at the same time, Lambert has created havoc everywhere that he's been, from Charlotte and some other coordinating positions. So, that's good for Wake. That's kind of bad news for Purdue to see what they're going to do. And the opener against Penn State is just a real matchup issue. The Nittany Lions are projected to have one of the best secondary units in the conference, if not in the country. And so that really, I might be taking Penn State in week 1. I'm still doing a deep dive on that, see how Sean Clifford's doing. But Minnesota, Maryland, Nebraska, those are coin flip games, but those are teams with no experience at linebacker. So Aiden O'Connell can expose them. So I think really it's a game-to-game thing on Purdue. Can the back 7 handle what Aiden O'Connell wants to do? How big is Charlie Jones, a transfer in from Iowa? Is he going to be in this offense? You're right. We're missing a star wide receiver in here that he has usually had. So, my projection is a little bit lower than the 7.5. They're the hot name. They're steaming in the market. Everybody expects a lot from them, but Brad Lambert's gone from that defense. Defense is going to step back. Their best player from the defensive line, not there anymore. So I'm kind of cool on Purdue here, and I think Penn State's going to be a play for me early.
Yeah, I should mention with Northwestern, we'll see who wins that quarterback job. I would assume it's Ryan Helinski, but there's I think Sullivan, the freshman, is impressing in camp, and I don't think a starter has been named.
How are you not playing Sullivan and when your first game is in Dublin? How are you not playing a guy named Sullivan?
Yeah, fair enough. I don't think Indiana's named the starter either, between Tuttle, who's terrible, and Connor Bazelak, who was terrible last year. I should mention that. And then Nebraska technically hasn't named their starter between Thompson and Purdy, but I imagine Thompson will get it. Iowa, Petrus and Padilla. Petrus should start. And I don't know if it's Padilla or Padilla. I've heard both names called. Rutgers, Vedral, or they have a young kid, Simon or Wismat. I would assume Wismat gets it, but we'll see. And then the last one we didn't mention, Illinois, Art Sikowski, who's awful. And Tommy DeVito, who they brought in. I think he fits kind of what they want to do. I love what Illinois did on the defense last year. I love Ryan Walters, the defensive coordinator. What a jump in efficiency they had, especially against the pass. The problem is it's hard to find a lot of wins. They got to start, they could start 4-0. They have Wyoming at home, then they're at Indiana, then home against Virginia, and then home against Chattanooga. Then things get a little messy. But I think I only have them favored in 2 games. I've projected 4.43. If I had to bet it, I would go over, but I think the number's about right. Before we wrap up, Collin, and we'll talk about Illinois some more because they're going to be playing in week 0. Favorite future and or win total. I don't think we need to go into the predictions for who wins the Big Ten because I think we both agree it's going to be Ohio State. But what do you got?
Listen, there's no edge in the number, but I think Michigan's going to go over 9.5. I don't think that we have seen how electric that this offense can be. It's something that we're not really used to with Michigan. Last year was ground and pound, but now Donovan Edwards is going to get more touches. Ronnie Bell comes back from the offensive side. They got 2 capable quarterbacks, and Harbaugh's going to continue to ride the hot hand. It doesn't matter that there's new coordinators on both sides of the ball because they're going to run the same schemes. It's not going to change much what's going on. And this schedule is conducive that they're going to be favored all the way up until Ohio State. So I like Michigan over 9.5. And then from a futures perspective, Nebraska plus 380 is something that a ticket that you could put in your pocket and you don't have to worry about it until the middle of November when that schedule really counts, specifically Wisconsin and Iowa at the end of the season are what's going to decide this division. Casey Thompson has a very high ceiling, also a very low floor, but that's going to work well with Mark Whipple coming in as offensive coordinator. And as long as Scott Frost can get some attention on those special teams, which have been near dead last in the nation for years, if they can get some improvement there, Nebraska is going to return to being the old Cornhuskers. They're going to win this division and play in the Big Ten championship. So I love Nebraska plus 380 to win the West, something that you can easily hedge out towards the end of the season.
All right, I'm going to build on what you said about Nebraska. And my favorite win total is Nebraska over 7.5 games. I have them favored in their first 9 games, 8 of them by double digits. Just win those games and you're over the win total. Love the addition of Mark Whipple. Love what they did in the transfer portal. They did lose some production, some key positions, but I think they'll be able to replace them with some of the additions through the transfer portal. And like you mentioned, special teams has really cost this team, especially in close games. So those mistakes are amplified. Last year, they went 0-9 in one possession games. Crazy. So a lot of regression coming. And I think just by solving the special teams issues, some of these close losses can turn into close wins. And I think they did that. They finally have a special teams coordinator. They went out in the transfer portal, brought in a very reliable punter and kicker. I think their return units will be much better this year. And that'll make a world of difference for a very talented team that is due a lot of breaks this year. So I love it from a schedule perspective. And then for what they did in the offseason, give me Nebraska over 7.5 wins. From a futures perspective, I agree with a lot of the win totals and futures prices, but if there was one I was going to bet, just lay the 200. If you find minus 200 on Ohio State to win the Big Ten, this is their conference this year.